Welcome to another DragonLance Saga Dungeon Mastering 101 episode. It is Palast Brook Green the Ninth. My name is Adam, and today I'm continuing my Dragonlance gaming series all about dungeon mastering. Most new dungeon masters tend to think of encounters as in combat, and while that can be the case, it doesn't always mean that. Every fight, every negotiation, a puzzle, skill challenge follows the same four-part framework. And once you know it, you'll never run a flat scene again. And it'll probably expand your idea about encounters in the process. So let's get into it. And right before we do, I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga YouTube members and Patreon patrons, and invite you to consider becoming a member or patron if you're not already. You can find links in the description below. You can even pick up Dragonlance Media or get $10 off startplaying.games by using my affiliate link, which is pretty cool, pretty fun. Good stuff, right? Hey, Corey, how you doing, man? Yes, I did. I need to change my artwork now. No, I'll probably grow it back. Just need to let it breathe. You know what I mean? Your chin's got to breathe. I'm actually kind of cold right now. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to Dungeon Mastering 101 is what an encounter actually is. You might be surprised because most people, when they think of encounters, they think of combat, right? Well, most new Dungeon Masters think encounter means combat. Well, it doesn't. An encounter is any moment where a player must engage, decide, or act. So that includes fight in a burning warehouse, a tense negotiation with the city guard, a puzzle carved into a dungeon door, a skill challenge crossing a collapsing bridge. If it demands a decision and it carries consequence, it's an encounter. And once you understand that, your entire prep toolkit expands, and it changes the way that you even consider setting up scenes themselves. This first sort of came out as an idea to me when Saga System came out, because Saga System did something that Vampire the Masquerade and basically every World of Darkness game had been doing up to that point, and it framed everything around scenes. And when you frame events, engagements, every moment in a game around a scene, well, then suddenly everything is a scene. And you can just change the vernacular from scene to encounter. Everything is an encounter. So if you're coming into town, well, that's a setup for an encounter, right? Well, what happens when you get there? Are you stopped by a city guard? Do you go to the tavern? Do you pick up the package that some young lady dropped as she was crossing the street? All of these are encounters that you as the player have to negotiate, and you as the dungeon master are setting in front of them so that they can negotiate. So in my Tyranny of Dragons campaign, sessions past, they were going through a swamp heading toward what ultimately would be the Citadel of Karak-Tor. But they didn't know what they were, where they were headed to. They didn't have any idea. So the swamp itself was an encounter. They had to deal with the realities of negotiating a swamp, the denizens that exist within the swamp. And when you're thinking about swamps, and I mean, in any encounter, we're going to be talking about this in just a second, but you have to then set the stage, as it were, right? You have to dress the encounter and start really taking time to explain to the players the depth and details that are going to be germane to their decision making, because it's going to be hard for them to make any decision if they don't know what it is they're deciding or what options are available to them in that environment. And that's your job as the dungeon master to do all that stuff. Hey, Mark, how you doing? Michael Fassbender vibes. It's not a new look. This is how I've always looked. It's just with less hair. All right, so the second thing I wanted to talk about is the four-part encounter framework. So this is something that you can just take with you, and you will forever use it in every single encounter you set up in the future. Every encounter, regardless of type, can build around four elements. The first is the objective. What needs to happen for this encounter to matter? And while in a tabletop role-playing game, everything that players do does not have to have significant weight to it, but there should be some reason why they're experiencing it. Otherwise, you should be skipping over that part. For example, we had to run a campaign where you, in Tyranny of Dragons, where you had to caravan for months up this stinking coastline of Coastland. And quite frankly, that was annoying as hell. However, what I didn't do was start, okay, the sun rises. What are you guys doing today? Okay, it's 10 minutes later. Have you decided to do anything else? All right, 20 minutes have passed. What are you going to do? All right, it's now lunchtime. What are you going to... You have to skip over the meaningless, banal, daily routine stuff. There's no point in it. So instead of doing that, skip. Explain what happens through the course of the day. Focus on the weather or the environment or the state of the wagons or just the people that are accompanying the caravan. And do a quick synopsis until you hit the next encounter. And the encounters are what matter. They're the things that bring story points out, lore drops for the characters to enjoy, puzzles for them to figure out, and yes, combat to overcome. So what is the objective of the encounter that you're trying to put out there, right? What needs to happen for it to matter? The next one is hook. What forces the player to engage immediately? Because look, let's be honest. Some players, if they see, let's just say there's a barkeep belittling a barmaid or a patron, not every player is going to get involved in that. So what is it, if you as the dungeon master are trying to set that up as an instigation moment, what is it that you can add to that setup to encourage them? Is one of your players a dwarf? Is the barmaid a dwarven female? Maybe that's all you need. Maybe they're wearing colors denoting a specific religion that one of your players follows, is an adherent of. Cleric. Maybe this is where you drop a backstory bit, right? So one of your players' parent was abused by some spouse or was a victim of a crime. Maybe they're getting flashbacks in this moment. So there's always little bits that you can add to an encounter that on its face, players could just walk right past. But if you really want to encourage them to engage with it, you can leverage a little bit, add a little bit of Dungeon Master sprinkling of Dungeon Master magic fairy dust, and involve their characters intimately in something that is completely abstract to them in the moment, and suddenly they want to get involved. So always think about stuff like that. So the next one, the third one, is tension. What raises the stakes as the encounter unfolds, right? So if we're just going to continue on with the barmaid situation, maybe you step up to the bartender, scolding him or telling him to, take it easy on the young lady. And then suddenly tension escalates. Other patrons stand up and tell you to mind your damn business. Well, now we've got a real situation. These other people that were there were complicit simply by allowing it to happen. And now that you're stepping up, they don't like an outsider getting into the locals' business. So now we have a situation, right? Now you have to play it out. So that's the tension. Or maybe he just pulls out a massive club that says Peacemaker on it. A little pull from a little Stephen King film back in the day. In any case, there's always ways that you can escalate it without actively attacking players. Because what I always try to instill in every player I've ever played with is that not every encounter needs to end in combat or needs to end in death. Like, most thinking creatures will run away if they're about to die. Most beings choose life over standing there. You have to be a fanatic to fight to the death. Most people don't do that. And so if you have players that are just going around slaughtering everyone even when they give up, well, then you need to start adjusting players' alignment, because they're playing in a very cruel manner, which does not befit most heroic behavior or expectations, I should say. Hey, Chris, how you doing, man? Exit. What ends the scene? That's the fourth bit, right? So how is this scene going to end? Again, like I mentioned, it doesn't have to end in combat and it doesn't ever have to end in death. Perhaps you try to negotiate with the innkeeper. Perhaps you just try to buy him off. Say, look, I'll give you 50 steel if you just leave this person alone. I don't want to watch it. I don't like it. I don't want to get involved in your lives. But for our sake of peace and happiness, I'm going to pay you some money for you to just to walk away from her. And whether it works or not, it's a potential exit that the players have set up. You as a dungeon master should brainstorm a couple loose-ended possibilities that the players would take. And you need to remind yourself at times, as a dungeon master, it does not always have to end in combat. All right, so the 4 parts again are objective, hook, tension, and exit. Is it a skill challenge? Is it a literal combat situation? Is it a negotiation with NPCs? Is it just pulling lore and getting your next bit of story beat to move on? All of these different encounter types have the same 4-part elements that you need to reference. So always think of that. If you're just having people walk in and you're giving them monologues and then they walk out, there's no actual role-playing involved with that. You just have a location that is going to give a dump of information and the players just have to walk in and then you move on to the next location that they're getting information and then they walk out. And then what? Like what is the purpose of all of this? If you want to encourage role-playing, you have to do that as well as a dungeon master. If you don't care about role-playing, then it doesn't matter. If your players don't care about it, then it doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. But this 4-part structure will help you build out a more believable experience for any type of experience. So you don't need pages of notes. You just need these 4 points. And if you can answer them before the session, the encounter will run itself. So let's do one really quick. So the objective, the heroes have to get across a rickety bridge. It's spanning about 200 yards. It's a huge old rickety bridge missing some wooden slats. How are they going to get across it? So what's the hook? How are the players going to engage with this immediately? Let's say there's a bunch of primitive natives running after them, trying to kill them and eat them, and they're just outnumber them, so they can't stand and fight. So now they have an objective. They got to get across the bridge, the rickety old disgusting bridge, and the reason is because they're being chased. Now what's the tension? It's a rickety old bridge and they're being chased. So they have to carefully navigate as they step on the wood and the wood breaks beneath them. They have to do a skill challenge, dexterity checks, strength checks to hold on, everything in order to get to that end sequence. And what's the exit? Well, if the people chasing them cut the bridge ties, a la Temple of Doom, they got to hold on to the bridge, right? More skill challenge. And they hold on as they swing all the way down and smack against the other side. And then they have to hold on and do an athletics check to climb up. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can make an encounter that, one, yeah, they could just, okay, well, I'm just going to run across the bridge. All right, scene over. Encounter done. Or you could make it into something memorable and exciting. An actual encounter, So that's just one little example. You love timed elements to escalate tensions as well. Stinking boat, fire growing all around. Yeah. So the next one I wanted to talk about is the objective. Why does this encounter exist at all? Why did you put it in front of the players? So again, you don't need to force them to live every single minute in the game world, only the moments that matter. So how do you decide, or when should you decide a moment matters? The objective is not the player's goal, it's the encounter's purpose in the story. So you as the dungeon master have to ask yourself, does this encounter reveal information? Does this encounter apply pressure to the players? Does the encounter force a choice? Does this advance the relationship or a conflict to the characters? Every encounter should have a reason of existing and not just be, a 2D scrolling Mario level that they just get past without any real effort. The point is that they learn something, or there's some story beat that needs to be discovered or dropped or worked through, or there has to be some justifiable reason for you to stop the time on the clock and force them to focus in this moment. So if the answer is the players need to fight something, well, that's not really an objective. That's a filler. So every encounter should earn its place at the table. And this is where you have to think about random encounters, right? So random encounters are almost always set up, especially in old school Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, as combat encounters, but not always. Dragonlance did a really great job with their DL modules of having random encounters that did not deal specifically with encounters all the time. Or you didn't have to fight your way through the encounter. You just encountered, maybe it's an individual or a bunch of farmers that are trying to get away from the dragon armies. An encounter is just an experience that you have to stop the clock and focus on for some reason. So you need to have a reason and some sort of payoff. And while for some players, treasure is enough of a payoff, they don't need justification, they don't need the whys or wherefores, and they don't really care about the interest. They just want to advance their character and get treasure. That's fine for them, but that's not every character. And I would argue that probably half or more of your players care about the story that you're both telling together. So they want you as a dungeon master to take a little bit of thought and time and give a justified reason for an encounter taking place. And like I said before, you can even weave it in with random encounters. So what I did with the swamp, going back to Tyranny of Dragons, there was a random encounter of a shambling mound. Well, the players were trying to take a break, and they were actively being chased already. And I wanted to impress on them the urgency of the moment. So instead of allowing them to take an hour-long break or more, a shambling mound came shambling along and forced them to continue moving. So the purpose of the shambling mound random encounter wasn't just to kill it and steal its treasure, if it even had any. The point was to let the players know you can't sit around and wait. People are on your tail, and the swamp itself is alive and ready to kill you. So you tipping your hat like that as a DM lets the players know, okay, we need to get our head in the game and start thinking survival tactics. Because if we can't rest and we're running out of spells and hit points, we need to start thinking our way through this, not just fighting our way through this. And that's where I think players should always be, but it's not always the case. Goldman, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Looting a corpse, which for a thief comes easy. However, a paladin might have a different moral stance. Interesting to see how the character dynamics would play out given the obvious moral tension. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what's next? What do we have here? Segment 4 here, I'm going to go into hook. Force immediate engagement. So a hook is what pulls players in before they hesitate. Without a hook, the player can stall, the momentum of the game drops, and the encounter feels optional, right? So there's some strong hooks that you can rely on. I've already mentioned a couple of them before, but sensory, the smell of smoke hits you before you see flames. Well, now I need to go investigate. What is on fire? Are you close to your hometown? Oh my gosh, my hometown. Did I leave the stove on? You rush back home to see what's going on. Is it personal? The NPC that you trust is in danger. Well, that's a pretty strong hook and encouragement for you to get involved. Is this urgent? Like a door is closing, and like the timed situation that Chris had mentioned just a moment ago, you have seconds, and you got to figure out this puzzle before the door finally closes, sealing you in and, closing you off in the Temple of Doom, for example, killing you. The hook doesn't always give players a choice about whether to engage or not. It gives them a choice about how they engage. So you don't always have to rely on the player's willingness to, I don't really want to do a puzzle. All right, well, now your life's in danger. Do you want to do the puzzle now? Now they have to. They're forced into it. There's a saying when I was in the military, whenever someone asks a question, ask if someone would mind doing something, I'm like, well, now they can just say no. If you need something done, don't ask people to do it. Just tell them to do it. I mean, I was, the context of, I was a sergeant in the military telling my soldiers to go do something rather than watching my other NCOs asking their soldiers to do things. And they're like, hemming and hawing and debating. I'm just like, all right, stop. Go take care of this right now. You don't give a choice in every situation, because if you give a choice, people will choose not to do it. So don't abuse that, but sometimes it can add a little bit of pressure. And that's not always a bad thing. All right, so tension is coming up next from the 4, right? What raises the stakes mid-scene? Tension is what keeps an encounter alive after it starts. And without that tension, even a well-designed fight goes flat. So tension comes from a timer or a countdown, shifting conditions like fire spreading, reinforcements arriving, allies faltering, escalating cost. Every round, something gets worse. You're losing hit points, or more enemies are added onto the board, or whatever. A moral complication mid-encounter could arise. If you're a paladin, for example, and you see another player ready to murder someone who has surrendered, well, that is going to encourage the encounter to continue, and it's going to add some moral complexity to it, right? Are you going to stand by and be complicit? And if you are, is your God going to be okay with that choice? So always think about how you can help continuously add fuel to the fire of an encounter in order to keep the encounter interesting and going until it reaches its natural conclusion. So design at least one tension escalation into every encounter. It transforms a static scene into a living one. So if we're going to do this for the bridge scenario, right? You're running across the bridge because there's horrible people behind you wanting to kill you or eat you. You start dropping through, your foot breaks through the bottom rung of the bridge that you're going across because the wooden beams are all rotten. You sort of slide through. You got a friend reaching over, doing a dexterity check to grab onto you. The weight of you pulls them down. More boards break. And then you suddenly see a bunch of birds coming through that, like carrion birds that are coming to maybe try to pick you off or knock you down so that they can pick off your remains in the bottom. You're adding on tension elements in a moment when you just could easily have just run across, right? You made a memorable encounter by doing it. So then, of course, the exit. Every encounter needs some form of, how do we end this thing, right? New DMs often forget to design the exit, and the encounter drags on past its natural conclusion because of that. So is it victory? The objective is achieved. Is it escape? The players retreat and with consequences. Is there some form of a resolution? A social or puzzle scene reaches its natural conclusion? Or is there some form of revelation because new information has been revealed or changed? Know your exit before the encounter begins so that you know when to end that encounter. When you see it approaching, steer toward it. A scene that ends cleanly is always remembered. One that overstays its welcome is often forgotten. Or just seen as punishment for some obscene reason on the DM's part. We should always be encouraging players to keep pushing and keep challenging themselves, even though, admittedly, it can be frustrating to be able to do that in the modern game edition. But it is something that you should continuously try to do. And if the players don't like being challenged, well, they definitely don't belong in my games, but arguably you should probably think of other ways that are not either combat related or perhaps puzzle related to challenge them. Because the whole point of doing a tabletop role-playing game is the challenge of it. It's inherently built in by the fact that you have stat numbers and you have dice to roll and you have hit points till you die. That's all exists so that you can use it as leverage in a challenge. That's the point of the whole game, is the challenge. So find out the ways that players enjoy challenges and then give it to them. And mix up the challenges in some cases, I mean, we ended the last Tyranny of Dragons campaign where some players were holding their breath underwater, and we had environmental magic going around, and other players like standing on the outside going, "Oh crap, what do we do?" So it's not a straight up combat situation. You have people that can only hold their breath for so long. We don't know how deep this thing is. If you're wearing armor, it's really hard to swim when you got 300 pounds of armor strapped to your back. So you've got a lot of environmental issues to consider in addition to the spells that are going around. So there's always ways to make a bland combat encounter much more interesting if that's the direction you're going to go, i.e. combat, or if you're just going to do a straight challenge, skill challenge or something like that. But always have a way of an out, and always let the players know when that happens, or so that they're not continually trying to figure something out. There's nothing worse than spinning your wheels in a game and realizing that you didn't have to do that. All right, so there are 4 encounter types of combat that I wanted to go through really quick here. Tension through risk and consequences. The best fights have a reason to win beyond survival. So ask yourself, what changes in the world when this fight ends? So again, I'm going to go back to a game that I've been running, Tyranny of Dragons. We had a night hag trying to steal a Kender's soul, and it was stolen back and released by the heroes. Now the Night Hag's coming after them, both in their dreams and in the real physical world. And they're doing everything they can to defeat this creature who keeps coming in and out of their lives. So it's an ongoing villainous threat. So how do you, what changes when this fight ends? If they could defeat this creature, well then they've resolved the problem of this Night Hag of Morgian trying to steal their souls and spread Morgian's diseases throughout the coastland region, right? Or if they don't defeat the Night Hag, they might be the next target of it, and it's going to become a story beat and a villain that continuously chases them down and pops up in the most inopportune moments. So there's always some form of consequence for actions, and there's always a reaction to their actions. If they didn't try to take the soul out of the bag from the Night Hag, then the Night Hag wouldn't be after them in the first place. If the player didn't renounce their god, then they never would have come into the attention of Morgan in the first place. So there's always consequences and reactions to players' choices that lead to these types of encounters, which then build and then change the world due to their involvement. So skill challenges, for example, group problem solving under pressure, define a goal for the puzzle, set consequences for failure of that goal, and let players find their own path. Avoid requiring specific skills, because then if the players don't have it, or if they've tried once and they failed, then everyone's kind of screwed. So a great example of this, and it's something that I sort of struggle with in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st and 2nd edition, is hidden secret doors. I want players to find secret doors, but it's really hard in 2nd edition specifically to find secret doors. You have to be intentional about it. You can't just wander on next to it and be like, oh, whoa, what is that? Right? I got the sun in my eyes. So think about ways, secrets that they might find. They might not find the secret door, but there might be environmental cues that the door would be somewhere, which would then encourage them to look for it, right? So this becomes a skill puzzle or a skill challenge. And then you have traditional puzzles. It rewards observation and lateral thinking. Keep them solvable when available, with available information. A puzzle that no one can crack isn't clever. It's just a wall, and it's frustrating as hell for players. Even if you think it's the easiest puzzle in the world, out of context, out of your knowledge of designing it, the players may not think it's very easy. So lean on skills or lean on attributes to help drop clues if the players are not able to figure it out. That way, they still feel like they're figuring it out by the character getting those clues right, even if the player can't do it. That's the point of the game, right? Don't make your players feel dumb because they can't figure out a puzzle that you didn't give them any clues to solve. Give them opportunity and then encourage them along the way. All right, and then social scenes. NPCs with goals, not with scripts. Monologues are very much a module type experience, but if there's times when you can freeform that dialogue and extrapolate and personalize it, that's what you should really be doing. So it's always best to have little bullet points of ideas or phrases or concepts that the NPC knows or wants to impart or can be gleaned through conversing with them. As long as you have those story beats, and we've already talked about developing NPCs and making them interesting and memorable, then deliver them with that, those skill sets that we've already talked about in the past, so that the NPC is memorable, but also the information they're giving them is entertaining and fun. So even if it's just affecting a voice, if it's a lizard creature, pull the S's out just a little bit. That's really all you need to do to make what could be a bland character into something like, oh, that's the lizard man. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about here is common beginner mistakes when designing encounters, right? The first one is obvious. It's over-designing encounters. You don't need a full map. I know people freak out about that, but you don't. You don't need a full stat block, and you don't need a full script. A lot of times whenever a player asks me, well, how do we do that? I just roll a dice. Let's find out. I would rather make up a ruling on the fly than go through and search texts to find what an official ruling might be. Logic always one-ups and owns a ruling if you're in the heat of a moment, right? Just be consistent with it. So you need 4 points and flexibility, and we've already talked about what the 4 points of designing the encounter are. So don't go further than that. If you need a map, if you can't just draw it out really quick on like an erasable battle map at your table, there's nothing wrong with having default maps set up on your VTT, for example, that you can just pull everyone over to and then just, quickly explain the situation if you need that visual cue. But I would challenge everyone, at least try to have one pure theater of the mind encounter every session. What you do by doing that is you break expectation. If at every encounter you have a battle map, then players are not thinking in terms of an encounter unless they see their tokens on a battle map. You need to encourage your players to think inventively and creatively the whole game. You're putting so much time into it, you want them to be considerate and put time into it as well at the table, right? So you want them to engage with what you've prepped. So it's very much like that sort of Pavlovian bell and making dogs drool when the bell rings. You need to train human beings with specific behavior. And when it comes to inventiveness and creativity, showing them a visual physical battle map is a shortcut to thinking. They don't have to imagine anything anymore because you've shown it to them. Describe the environment. Talk about what they're going to be experiencing and encountering. You don't have to do it for every encounter, but I challenge you to at least do it once a session. This way, you're breaking the chain of them thinking it's not an encounter unless it's a battle map, and you're encouraging them to imagine. The greater the imagination, the greater experience you're going to have later on running your games, and the easier it's going to be creative with your stories, and the more the players are going to be remembering them because they've inputted imagery and experience into the world that you never did. And it's their imagination that fuels all of that, right? If you're showing everything, or everyone everything, then there's no imagination involved. I went way too far under that one. No exit strategy is a big common mistake. Encounters that have no clear ending drag on and frustrate. So I always loved the rule from West End Games' Star Wars role-playing game where they straight up tell you, and Vampire the Masquerade does this as well with their storytelling game system. There should be only a small handful of rounds in any encounter. You should not be going massive amounts of rounds because then it gets boring and it drags down. When you have game systems like 5th edition, when every player has a potential of 4 different actions, well, it can be drugged down on its own, just simply by each character going, well, what am I going to do for this type of an action? And then I have these other types of actions. What do I want to do? Do I want to go anywhere? Do I have any bonus or reactions? Or there's so many different things that they have to consider. You need to keep every encounter succinct and tight so that players are ready to just roll and they're thinking, when another player is actively engaging, right? What am I going to do once it's my turn? So when they drag on longer than 3 or 4 rounds, well, then at this point, you're just beating each other over the head with a stick. You know, it's whack-a-mole at your local arcade. There's nothing fun about that. If after 3 or 4 rounds, the encounter has not naturally come to its conclusion, consider ending it in another way. So, for example, in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign, I had the Bacali decide, after being inspired by the heroes standing up to the cultists, the bullywugs, and these other threats, with the Renegade Wizard of the Tower of High Sorcery and Jakku, the Night Hag of Morgian, the Bacali were just like, we're going to rise up. We're going to help get you guys out of here, so follow us. Now, the players aren't always going to do that, but you gave an opportunity for an out to end the encounter. And that will then cue them up. If they're getting tired, they're just like, yeah, we need to figure out a way to get over this, so let's move on. Insight checks in modern editions are really great to help give advice or tips. Wisdom checks in previous editions are another great way of giving insight and tips. So don't force your players to end encounters on their own, because that could be really annoying for them. You should have pacing, know what the out is, and help steer them to that out if it's getting a little bit too long in the tooth. Single solution design is what I was talking about with the puzzles, right? If there's only one way to succeed, players feel railroaded. Build at least 2 valid approaches to any situation. And I would argue you don't really have to build this, because players are going to always choose the thing you didn't plan. It's just what they do. So you're always going to have them as inspiration as well, mid-encounter in some cases. But always consider that there must be more than one way to solve a puzzle, to overcome an encounter, to engage with NPCs. So don't try to force anything on the players if you can. I know some games or some modules are very direct with how to approach things. Make sure that they feel like they have a choice, even if it's only 2 choices or 3 choices. They still have a choice, and they're deciding which directions to go. And then, if you still wanted to throw an encounter that only happened in one of the choices, throw it at them. Just put it in a different place. Like, you don't have to keep everything as you set it up. You can change stuff on the fly. You're the dungeon master. Do what you want. It's all to feed into the player's fun, right? I fail at this a lot. And that's why I like bringing this stuff up, because it's also a way of reminding myself. Okay, and then ignoring player investment is a problem. The best encounters connect to something that the player already cares about, right? Is it a religious situation with a cleric? Is there a barbarian that's having to deal with technology, and yet they're completely foreign to it, or like an Advanced Dungeons & Dragons barbarian dealing with magic and they just want to destroy it? Is it a ranger that is going to be leveraging their tracking skills in a situation? You always want to make sure that the players are invested into something about the characters. And that way, you're tying them to the encounter, you're encouraging them to engage with the encounter, and they're going to remember it because it's intimate to their character. So the DM101 mindset shift here is that here's the reframe that changes everything. You're not designing obstacles. You're designing decisions. So think about that. Every encounter should ask the players something. What do you value? How far are you willing to go? And what are you willing to risk? If the players are even asking one of those, it's going to be a memorable experience for them. If they're not asking any of those and they're just running in and hitting things, encourage them to consider. If they still then refuse, then acknowledge that that's their player style and give them those opportunities. But for those who want to have that considered play, make sure you give them those options. When encounters ask real questions of the players, players will give real answers, and that's where memorable moments come from. You have to encourage people to roleplay in order to have them roleplay, right? So the takeaway that I like here is that encounter design is not about complexity, it's about clarity. Know the objective, build the hook, layer in tension, and design the exit. Do that for any encounter type, whether it's combat, social, puzzle, or challenge, and you will never run a flat scene again. This framework doesn't limit creativity, it actually focuses it, and it encourages player investment. So that's what I had for it. Regardless of what system you use, you always preferred one action per player, with the exception being healing another player. Yeah, memories. All right, so what do you guys think? Do you have encounter suggestions? Do you think all encounters should have some form of physical, combat or at least altercation? I mean, everyone's going to land on this a little bit differently. If you've never run a skill challenge, it's the best, in my opinion, the best thing that came out of 4th edition and Star Wars 2nd Saga edition. They focused on it as well. They were being developed concurrently by Wizards of the Coast at the time. I would highly recommend you run some skill challenges. They completely reframe the encounter. It completely changes a player's concept of what an encounter is. And when you then layer in skill challenges with combat encounters, you've got some opportunity for some great storytelling. So do yourself a favor and just try to be a little bit more creative on your next encounter and not just throw some kobolds at someone, have them kill them, and then move on. It can be better. And you owe it to yourself as the Dungeon Master, right? All right. Watch out for apple thieves. Yeah. All right, that is it for this episode of Dungeon Mastering 101, running the game encounter design for beginners. Do you have any tips or tricks based on your experience as a player or a dungeon master? And am I off based on any of my suggestions? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to remind you, taking a moment, to subscribe to the YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. It all goes to help other DragonLance fans learn about this channel and its content. Thank you to creator patrons Aaron Hardy and D. Robert Handy, developer patrons Chris Androu and Sam Ruiz, and all of the YouTube members. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga, and I hope you're joining that celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with DragonLance Saga, and until next time, Sláinte mhath.